Our universe is built on the number 2. In our cells, DNA is composed of 2 helical threads. Matter has its opposite, antimatter. Computers run on a binary code built on 2 digits, 1 and 0. Likewise, mythology is built around good and evil, 2 forces that oppose each other in both action and purpose. God has his counterpart, Satan. Jesus has his opposite in the Antichrist. This pattern even shows up in polytheistic mythology. Thor has his counterpart, Loki. The Olympian gods in Greek mythology have their opposites in the Titans. However, one of our more popular mythological figures, Santa Claus, has lost the tail of his opposite, called the Krampus. This being dealt out punishment to the wicked children of the world. For the particularly nasty children, the Krampus dealt out the harshest of punishments: abduction and death. Over time, as mankind expanded its command of the universe, our technologies and our own actions took the place that were once held by mythological beings. Nowadays, parents indulge their children with gifts, displacing the old Santa Claus. However, there exist parents that snap and do unthinkable things to their children. Every year, our news media carries stories about parents gone over the edge, almost like they were possessed by a demon. With no Santa Claus to reward the righteous, and no punishment for the wicked, both forces are unleashed indiscriminately against both good and evil. For every naughty child rewarded, a counterbalance must exist. Yin must have yang. Patrick had moved to Winter Harbor hoping to escape the despondency and despair he had felt in his hometown of Belmont, Maine. So far, these feelings had only amplified, magnified by both the wintry death that he felt tiptoeing in the town's midst, and the lingering scent of paint that seemed to permeate every building in the city. It was as if the town was constantly being repainted in some sort of half-hearted attempt to cover something up. Still, he felt it was necessary to stay, so as not to make matters worse for his wife, who he barely saw anymore, and his son, who always seemed so distant. He and his wife were going through a rife time in their marriage, and their son was feeling its effects. It was akin to what one may feel after a tremendous earthquake. Patrick felt that he had to make it up to his son, so he went out and bought the most expensive and extravagant thing that he could put his hands on this late in the shopping season: a brand new video game system. He had assured his son that even though he'd acted out a few times this year, Santa would bring him something good. Throughout these charades, Patrick felt empty at the prospect of shopping for a boy that he knew nothing about, a boy whose existence was forgotten every so often. On the eve of Christmas, Patrick arrived home just before the snowstorm and quickly crept into the garage to wrap the present and place it under the tree. It was in this garage that he often felt absurd changes, as if within its small space it contained secrets beyond human comprehension. The musky smell of the old holiday decorations, coupled with the omnipresent scent of fresh paint, varnish, and gasoline, all seemed to meld into one personified force, whispering sweet nothings to Patrick as he exited the car. This caused him to shudder heavily, as if beset by a fit of delirium. He shrugged off the dull headache and dry mouth before quickly and sloppily wrapping the gift. Following this, he slipped it under the tree and began to creep upstairs. He couldn't help but grimace at the thought that he was as far from Santa as humanly possible. As he reached the top of the landing, Patrick glanced over at the clock. It read 11:49. He stood there, as if to wait for some fleeting childhood feeling that may accompany the arrival of Christmas. It didn't come, as he soon found out. Nor did cheery music, nor the scent of evergreens and cookies, just deafening silence, and that damnable scent of paint. It was everywhere. He couldn't escape it. The arrival of yet another disappointing Christmas struck Patrick like a blow to the face. He fell to his knees, and subsequently onto his stomach. He couldn't tell if he'd passed out or not. Suddenly, a loud sound in his son's room jarred Patrick awake. He quickly got up and stumbled into the room. The popping sound he heard made him wonder what had made it, and when he finally found out, he was just confused even further. A large, black humanoid adorned with goat horns and a tongue that writhed like a snake stood before him, clutching his son. Patrick stood, dumbfounded, seemingly incapable of recognizing not only the creature, but anything else before him. What do you want?" Patrick asked, innately knowing that the creature wanted something. The creature smiled, licking its lips.
"Thine tender fruit, not spoiled by the worms of new, but by the tree that bore it, ripened into ambrosia, but a rotten, hollow core."
Patrick stared at the creature, sweat beginning to collect on his brow. He felt as if his brain itself had been lit afire. He couldn't breathe. I can't say that I understand. Patrick stammered out. The creature smiled again.
"Not by love of a dying star can a planet be adorned, but by the eruption of its most sacred peaks. I desire the treasure from which you hope to find salvation, the gift to your boy. It is a gift from me now."
Patrick couldn't understand why the creature would want the game system, but he felt it necessary to give it up. He quickly bolted down the stairs, grabbed the box, and clutching it tight, he sprinted back up to his son's room. The creature, upon his arrival, thrust Patrick's son to the floor and held out one long, beckoning hand. As Patrick handed over the present, he couldn't help but feel as if he were Faust himself, exchanging an eternity for one single moment of gratification. The creature licked his lips once more and disappeared in the time it took Patrick to blink. When he was sure that he was alone, Patrick fell to his knees and wrapped his arms around his son. He expected a thank you, and I love you, something. He heard nothing. He looked down. He felt that his son was withering away, becoming the very shadows that inhabited the night around him. Patrick knew at that moment that he was entirely alone, swallowed finally by the chasm beneath his feet. He stumbled to the garage before sitting down, embracing his solitude and his communion with the musky smell of paint that seemed to beckon, inviting.